So, folks, we were teased that nerfs are coming sometime this week, and some buffs are on the way as well. So, of course, I wanted to lock in some predictions and kick off some discussion amongst the YouTube comments down there for which cards are the most likely to be nerfed and maybe some of the ones I'd like to see buffed. So let's start off here with the cards I think are going to get nerfed, or at the very least cards that are possible to get nerfed. I'm not saying every card in this video will get nerfed, just these are some of the choices that seem most likely. So number one suspect here is Crab Rider. This guy has been complained about a lot. He's played a ton. For an early game neutral card like this, he has an absurdly high played rate, especially for a common non-legendary sort of card. So competing with cards like Mancrick, which is at least legendary. And of course, fueling things like faster Paladin decks and Rush Warrior using Crab Rider really successfully, popping into a few other decks here and there as well. And yeah, I think absolutely Crab Rider is target number one for a nerf. I suspect he'll probably go to 3 health. I think pushing it to 3 mana as opposed to a stat adjustment feels a little bit punitive for Crab Rider, puts him behind some comparables. So just bringing that health down is, a smaller nerf percentage-wise, basically, of its total stat line. Seems more fitting for the Crab, and 3 health is so much easier to deal with for a ton of decks. They have 3 damage removal cards, and that breakpoint is a pretty significant one between 3 and 4. So I don't know if that'd kill Crab Rider, but it's too early to say. Let's see what happens first. Next up, we have Draza, the Lifebinder, which I think is actually a potential target for a nerf. Blizzard has mentioned things like, we don't like games ending the same way every time, and Draza is being played a lot right now. Actually, the most played legendary card in Hearthstone at the moment. Maybe actually the most played card overall. I got to check that now that I think about it. Let me take a quick look while I'm talking about Draza. So if Blizzard's saying that they don't want games ending the same way every time, then sure enough, Draza's ending this game the same way. She's tied actually with Talon Forgeling exactly at the top. And I'm okay with Draza. I actually think she's a pretty cool card. I don't mind Alex. I hope she doesn't get nerfed, frankly. But I do know that when we're seeing percentages like that, where it's the number one played card, it's ending games the same way, those are things Blizzard has hinted at in the past as being problematic. Now, we also have here Mancrick showing up is my suggestion. And Mancrick is the 3rd most played card in Hearthstone, just behind Talon and Draza, only 1 percentage point away. And for an early game card being played across so many different kinds of decks, that's a warning sign, especially when it shows up in stuff like Control Priest, just because it's so good to get Enraged Mancrick, Find the Wife, and get that 310 on board for free. That's a huge body. That 10 health is such a problem for so many decks to deal with. So, of course, fast decks like that free damage and the sticky minion. Priest likes that big 10 health minion to build off of for things like Apotheosis, gives them a lot to work with. So when a card's played that much and it's such an early game card and it's a free card, I have a feeling Blizzard's going to hit Mancrick with the nerf bat. I, again, actually don't mind Mancrick. I think he's totally fine. I don't want to see Mancrick nerfed. I just think he is a potential target. So now let's talk about Mage cards here. A lot of people frustrated with Spell Mage, and I think these are the 2 prime targets for Mage. Now the deck of Lunacy is out of the way already. Incanter's Flow, Refreshing Springwater. And if I had to pick between these 2, I would absolutely pick Refreshing Springwater. I actually like Incanter's Flow, how it changes the numbers in a game, changes what you can do in a given turn. And when you're not totally full of resources and options, that's fine, because if you're playing more cards, sometimes you run out of gas. But then you get a card like Refreshing Springwater that comes around and you never run out of gas. You just draw through your entire deck. And that makes it a little less graceful in how you're sort of manipulating your deck, and you're drawing away to use all these decreased cost cards. So for me, Refreshing Springwater is really the root of the problem. I like the play style, the emphasis that Incanter's Flow provides. I'd be sad if that one got nerfed, but Springwater just seems like too big of a problem. It's problematic in Wild, apparently. It's not that crazy high tier according to the latest Vicious Syndicate report I saw, but still very frustrating to lose to with Flame Wakers, and also pretty darn frustrating in Standard too, when it feels like your opponent draws through their entire deck and plays an infinite amount of stuff in a single turn. So yeah, I would just say push Springwater to 5 mana maybe. You could do some other manipulations with the mana crystals where it's like refresh just one mana crystal. That's kind of awkward though. So I think pushing it to 5 just means you're not getting a full refresh unless you've already discounted this, in which case still you're not getting any extra mana out of it, which can sometimes happen late game with Spell Mage. So that would be a pretty easy fix. So next up, let's talk about Paladin cards. I think Paladin is probably a target, as Blizzard mentioned. And these two jump out at me as the two kind of either most frustrating or most powerful options. Yogg can be a pretty frustrating card and clearly good in Secret Paladin lists. But First Day at School, I think, is actually the more prime target because it's played in more lists and has really, really good win rates too. Of course, in the early game, because it basically shores up any weaknesses in Paladin's early game curve, filling in gaps on both turn 1, but sometimes also later in the game, just so that you have that extra body on board. And when you have that extra body on board, that plays into other really powerful cards like Conviction to give it attack buffs, or Avenge, so you have minions sticking around and lingering so that they absorb buffs as well. Having minions on board for Paladin buffs is priority number 1. First Day of School makes that really, really reliable for them. So I think First Day of School could get nerfed. Now, the counterpoint there is that the 1-drop minions in the game right now are really, really good. That's because we have such a limited set of cards in rotation right now. As more and more bad cards get printed and consistency goes down, maybe First Day of School could kind of solve that problem itself. But if Blizzard wanted to tweak it now, I still think it would be absolutely fitting. Now, as far as how to nerf this card, I don't know. I feel like 1 mana is such an enormous change and it breaks that curve. If you make it 1 mana, I don't know, it might totally kill it. So if you guys have any ideas on how you'd fix First Day of School without completely slaughtering the card, I'm curious to hear that in the comments below. Same actually for Oh My Yogg. The problem with nerfing a secret like this is you can't tweak its mana cost because it has to be 1 mana or otherwise it's not going to be a secret. So what would you do to make Oh My Yogg a nerfed card? How would it suddenly, what do you tweak? Maybe it just casts a spell that costs 1 more, so your opponent is theoretically getting a little bit of extra value or oomph out of the spell potentially, but not getting the spell they want. It would still be disruptive, but it might have some occasional high roll potentials. That's probably the only fix that comes to mind for me. And then, yeah, I mean, Ticketus is still a potential nerf target. I'm not going to talk about this more. We've talked about this like 1,000 times over the last couple months. Some people want Ticketus to be nerfed. Some people don't. I think there are reasonable arguments on both sides. He's frustrating, but he's also just not that high win rate. So I'll let you guys duke that out in the comments below, but it's certainly possible that Ticketus could get a change. Just keep that in mind. And then finally, this one's a little bit of a flyer, but I think Hysteria is maybe the best card in Hearthstone. That's a kind of crazy thing to say when like neither Warlock or Priest are really at the top of the meta right now. But it feels like sometimes they're only good because of Hysteria. And it's just so crazy how many board states Hysteria is such an insanely efficient removal card. And it already got nerfed once. So, I mean, maybe me asking for, I'm not even asking, but maybe me thinking a nerf on Hysteria is coming again is absurd when it already got changed. But it still just feels so good. There's so many times a good Hysteria just absolutely swings games unbelievably well for only 3 mana. So think about it. What do you guys think? Is Hysteria a possible nerf target? Is it as good as I think it is? Am I absolutely crazy? It's actually the 5th most popular card in Hearthstone right now and the most popular of all class cards. Now, of course, dual class cards have a little bonus there, but there's other dual class cards that aren't as popular that are insanely good, like Brain Freeze or Primordial Studies, right? So it's doing something to gain this level of popularity, and to me, it's just it feels completely busted. So I'm curious what you think. All right, so next up, we're going to talk about buffs. Cards I'd like to see buffed. The people who like skimmed through the video and are like, wait, he wants to nerf Apothecary's Caravan? What's up? No, I want to see the Caravans buffed. And I actually just put 3 on screen here because I'm lazy, but all 5 Caravans could be buffed to 2 attack. And I think they'd still be reasonable cards. I don't think they'd get broken or anything just because they all have that start of turn effect that gives the opponent a lot of time to react to them with all kinds of rush minions and removal spells. What would it hurt to give these 2 attack? So I would actually just like a sweeping change across every Caravan, bump it up to 2 attack so that these cards can actually be utilized instead of just totally forgotten. It feels weird to have this kind of mini package of Hearthstone just totally fail. So bump these suckers to 2. I want to play some freaking Caravans. So another buff I'd like to see is to elementals in Shaman. And I just picked one here. There's a handful you could choose to buff. I think Earth Revenant would be a pretty cool one to buff, though. Maybe just increase the stats on this guy a little bit, make him like a 3/6. Honestly, maybe you could even make him a 4/6. Like, yeah, that's above stat line what you'd expect, and he's got a positive effect too. But frankly, to deal 1 damage to all enemy minions isn't that good lately. It was probably really good in the world of lackeys, but there aren't that many 1 health things floating around these days. So maybe you can make this deal 2 damage to all enemy minions, bump its stats, do something to make Earth Revenant feel more competitive, and just give Elemental Shaman some more like core build around cards, some stuff that's just maybe not build around, but core like meat stuff to just put in the deck that feels good to play on curve so that you can keep elemental chains going. Whether it's this card or not, I don't know, but I just want to see Elemental Shaman be an actual thing again instead of just running random elementals here and there. Let's get the synergistic elemental deck rolling with cards like Earth Revenant being a big part of that. I love this style of card. Big, awesome, defensive bodies like this are the sort of Hearthstone I enjoy, so that's probably why I picked this one. It also has really actually pretty sick art for Hearthstone. So another card here to talk about for a potential buff is a surprise to me, actually. Tavish Stormpike, the least played legendary card in Forged in the Barrens. That's right, played less than anything else. And I'm not sure Tavish is like a terrible Hearthstone card. I still think there's probably some world in the future where this gets played as is, but Hunter just lately hasn't really supported what Tavish is about. But that said, why not give him a little bump? I think you could make Tavish a little better, make him 2/6, make him stickier that way so that he's more likely to connect over multiple turns and build out a really big board. I don't think he'd be problematic as a 2/6. He's never felt that crazy when I've tried to make him work as is. So just making him stickier could give him that extra turn here and there that increases win rate substantially. Now, I just kind of picked Tavish because he was the least played. I don't have a great argument whether he'd be good or bad for the game. If you think there's another underplayed Barrens legendary card that needs to be buffed, share that thought down below. Maybe Tavish is too scary for you, but there's something else you've got your eye on instead. And speaking of eyes, yeah, I'd like to see Grand Totem Eyesore buffed. I want Totem Shaman coming back. I would just make this guy buff himself. He doesn't buff himself. He only buffs other totems, but I think he could buff himself and still be a reasonable card. He would be a 1/5 when you play him. A 3-mana 1/5 with effects aren't crazy. We've had those in Hearthstone for a long time. We have other cards like Invigorating Sermon that have been added to the game. That's 4-mana buff any kind of minion. This is 3-mana and it only buffs totems. It doesn't affect your hero power in the future. Of course, if you have leftover totems hanging around, it does. There's not that many totems to support it. It's like kind of impossible to make Grand Totem Eyesore feel good these days. But if he buffed himself, I think he would. Totem Shaman would be a pretty cool deck. And I don't think it would break anything. And then what about Deck of Chaos? This is such a cool card and archetype that's like impossible to really make it work in an exciting way. I've seen some people build some Deck of Chaos decks recently that were like sort of just like Control Warlock with like a couple cards to interact with Deck of Chaos. But I want every card in my deck to interact with Deck of Chaos. I want to do crazy, awesome stuff. And it's 6 mana. It's just too punishing to play this. It takes forever to get it down, and then by the time you got to swing so hard that it feels impossible because you've just given up so much tempo and so much of your turn. So I would make this thing like 4 mana, maybe 5 is the safe spot, but I would bump it up significantly and see if we can't get a cool deck out of Deck of Chaos. And then finally, Ancient Voidhound, or really just kind of the big demon package in Demon Hunter. I'm sick of only playing fast damage-based Demon Hunter decks. I want to play the class in a way that's more fun, that's slower, more control-oriented, and cards like Ancient Voidhound are just stupidly fun and awesome in how big they are, but it's really, really hard to get it to work right now. So maybe just make this thing like 8 mana. I think it'd be fine. Wouldn't be crazy broken. Obviously, it would be better than, a vanilla 8 mana card, but there's like crazy strong 8 mana stuff out there these days, or even cheaper. It would be completely fine, and it might help something like Big Demon Hunter get over the hump. Whether it's this card or another one you think that would be a more suitable fix, I don't care. I just want big late game demons to make sense in Demon Hunter, so I have a different way to grind out my 500 and 1,000 wins than just constantly playing some stupidly fast aggro Demon Hunter deck. And there you go. That's it. Those are my ideas for buffs, and archetypes basically to get buffed or packages to get buffed. I think those are good ideas, but feel free to tear them down and break my heart. And then these were my ideas for nerfs. And again, I don't think all these cards are going to get nerfed. I'm not even recommending that all these cards get nerfed. I just think that these are the possible targets that Blizzard could hit with the nerfs. That said, what do you guys think? What share all those thoughts below. I want to hear it all, good or bad. Share your takes on what Blizzard might do or how to save or fix the meta, whatever your thoughts may be. Or maybe you don't want any nerfs or buffs at all. That's a fine opinion as well, but I want to hear it. That said, thanks much as always for watching, and until next time, game on.